If it is fear in its multifold forms that limit us, that hold us back from being who we truly are, from fulfilling our potential, we need to have a look at what it is before we can start working with it. Now, one of the great advances over the last decade or so is a much greater, more common understanding of what's called neurophysiology, of how we as human beings work at the neurological, at the nervous and the physical level. Okay. Now, to understand fear in a very powerful but relatively simple way, it's best to use what's called the triune, the three-part model of the brain that was popularized a few decades ago. Okay. So when we look at this, there are three parts to the brain. The first part is really just the top of the spinal column, right down here at the base of the brain. Yep. This is the hindbrain, it's called, or sometimes the reptilian brain. And it's down here that the very basic stuff that we need as a physical organism lives. Instinct about feeding, instinct for survival, instinct for dominance to keep our place. So physical survival lives down here. We have a great example of this. Sometimes we do some work in Africa and we go to a small zoo where they have some alligators, crocodiles over there. And the chap who's taking us around has got a big stick. He'll step in over the fence and we're all going, "Ah, be careful, there's a crocodile in there." He goes, "Oh, it's all right," because crocodiles are doing what they normally do. And he'll take his big stick and he'll poke the sleeping crocodile. And the crocodile will go, "Wah!" back to sleep. Now you remember crocodiles, they have such a small brain, their heads are flat and their eyes stick up. So even for them, this reactive, instinctive, defensive survival instinct is there. On top of that, there's what's called the midbrain, or sometimes the mammalian brain. And in here is something called the limbic system, which modifies or controls our state, our emotional state, our perception. As you might think from the mammalian brain, what lives here is this emotion, the basic emotions of empathy, of connection, of looking after your children, of having a tribe and a group, of having a partner, of possession. So if you think of cats and dogs and squirrels and mammals, they give birth to their young, and instead of just laying an egg and walking away, they look after their young and they raise them. Even birds do that. So this, particularly for mammals, is the function of the limbic system, that warmth, that empathy we feel, that connection. And on top of that lies the third part of the brain, which is this bit that fills all of this, the reason we have a forehead and dogs don't, for instance. This is the human brain, the cortex, and particularly the prefrontal cortex, the neocortex here in the prefrontal. This is where what distinguishes us human beings lives. The ability to imagine, to think forward, to plan, language, structure, creativity, conceptualization, all live in here. And it's this that really helps, is where our human potential lives. So there's the three-part model of the brain. The hindbrain, the reptilian brain with instinct, the midbrain, the mammalian brain with emotion, and the superior brain, the third part, the forebrain, which is where the human brain lives. Now, just situated about here, some say primarily in the hind, some primarily in the limbic system, but crossing this barrier is something called the amygdala. Now this is very important. The job of the amygdala is to keep us alive. It's constantly scanning the environment to see if there are any changes. If nothing changes, it's fine, it lets it go. If there's a change, it'll pay attention. Is it a danger or not? No? Okay, let it go. If it is, it causes an extreme reaction in the body. So if you're ever in a meeting and then the door opens, Most people in that room, whatever's going on, will turn and look at the door. That's the amygdala in action. If there's something to be frightened of, this initiates that fight or flight response. Yeah? When your heart rate goes up, your metabolic rate, you get tense, and your whole body is prepared physically to fight or to run away from the danger. Now, one of the problems for us in our century, in our lives, is the fact that we're sitting down at our desks, typing away, and the phone goes. This whole explosion takes off, the adrenaline, the cortisol, and the whole body is prepared for action. And we pick up the phone and go, yes, hello, oh, next week, yes, oh, no, that'll be fine, thank you, no problem. Ah! And all of that surging around has nowhere to go. Because one of the things that happens in that is that the liver releases sugar into the bloodstream. And if we don't burn that off physically through use of muscles, it sort of just hangs on in there and it gets laid down here and here where there are tiny little blood vessels. And that's one of the reasons why people say stress kills, and why, if you have the opportunity, at the end of the day, you'll go to the gym and run an exercise to burn it all off before it starts clogging up those arteries. So what happens when this perceives a danger is it hijacks the whole of the system. It's called the amygdala hijack. And when this is going, it's only, remember, it's functioning from down here at the reptile level, pure survival. It hijacks all the resources of the brain and the human being to focus purely on physical survival. This means that when you're acting under the influence of fear, you are literally no longer human. You are acting from your reptile part. We were working with a group in Nairobi recently, and we used the crocodile as the metaphor. And they were literally talking about, your crocodile is beginning to snap, when people were beginning to get tense and beginning to get a little anxious or angry. And that's literally what it is. Now, this is important because any decision made in the state of fear is, by this definition, a wrong decision, because I have not been using my full human resources. I've been acting and so-called thinking from way down here, and I have not had access to this part of the brain. So if you've seen Red Box, Blue Box, you'll know that when I begin to be defensive and get passionate, I'm acting from here. No wonder I say things or do things that then, a moment later, an hour later, or a day later, I think about and I go, oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Because by then, I have access to my human capacity and my full emotional capacity of empathy, of concept, of understanding. And I realized that I was pretty stupid. I was probably aggressive. I was bullying. I shouted and I didn't need to because I was acting from my reptile self. So if we are really going to fulfill our potential, if we are going to create a fearless culture for ourselves and for other people, the first thing we have to do is to be able to manage this. And when that starts to kick in, to be triggered, we have to be able to let it go and maintain access to all of our facilities, all of our faculties as a human being.